So, do you want to know what happens next? The book of Ruth is just 85 verses long, and you have already read 1/4 of it this morning. So I commend it to you for reading this afternoon to find out the rest of the story. It is a good story. It is an important story. It is a story that is read by Jews every year in this month coming up in September during Sukkot. It's a week-long festival of that follows shortly after the high holy days of Yom Kippur, the New Year, and of Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. You may have heard of it referred to before as the Festival of Booths, because it is a time when Jewish people, maybe some folks you know, set up a shelter, a temporary shelter for the week of the festival that will remind them that they are celebrating the way God took care of them in the wilderness between Egypt and the Promised Land. But it's also a harvest festival. So, the book of Ruth is read, as we just heard, at the beginning of the barley harvest. That's when it is read. Now, if this year, Sukkot is going to be September 25th through October 2nd. So if you would like to celebrate Sukkot, you might want to reach out, learn more, read up on how Jews in our land celebrate Sukkot now. Or you might want to go on a camping trip of your own and live in a tent for a week sometime between September 25th and October 2nd. Or maybe go picking apples, as I know many of you enjoy doing. And while you are doing one of these things, take the book of Ruth with you, and you will be celebrating with our Jewish brothers and sisters who share this story with us. Now, the position of the book of Ruth in the Bible is also of interest, to me anyway, and I hope so to you. In the Christian Bible, it's tucked between the book of Judges and the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, where it chronologically makes sense, because it's a transition story. It's a story that brings us out of the time of the judges and into the time of the kings. It begins, as we read today, in the days of the judges, and ends just 3 generations before Israel's greatest and most favorite king, King David. It is the love story of David's great-grandparents. I wonder if you have such a story in your ancestry. But it begins with the love story of a daughter-in-law for her mother-in-law. The last verse of the book of Judges reads this way: "In those days there was no king in Israel. All of the people did what was right in their own eyes." Now, if you read back a few chapters in Judges, you will find out that right in their own eyes had many definitions, many of which we would not think were right in our eyes. But right after those words, everybody did what was right in their own eyes, we get this story of a woman from off who did right in the eyes not only of herself, but of the nation of Israel and in God's eyes. And that brings me to the placement of this book in the Hebrew Bible. For Jews arrange the text slightly differently than we do in their Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, Ruth would be found in the section called Ketuvim, the writings, in which you would find this order of books: Psalms, Proverbs, Job, the Song of Solomon, then Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, Daniel, Ezra, Nehemiah, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Now, scholars believe that it is placed here in the Jewish Bible because it would have been written around the early 6th century BCE, which is the time in which the Jewish people are making their way back from exile in Babylon. and it is in conversation with two other books in the writings, Ezra and Nehemiah. In Ezra and Nehemiah, the foreign wives that the Israelites have brought back with them from Babylon are being sent away, along with the foreign gods that the people had picked up while they were away. So, if this is true, then this book, Ruth, gets to be in conversation with books full of edicts, getting rid of foreign wives, in which we get to see Ruth reminding us, Ruth, a Moabite who marries an Israelite, reminding us of what it is to be steadfast in love and faithfulness. So I've told you that this little book of Ruth is a harvest story and a provision in the wilderness story. It's a story of emptiness to fullness. I've told you that in the Christian Bible, it's placed where it makes chronological sense, historical sense, somewhere between the judges and the kings. And it offers an example of someone living righteously in a time when folks were free to do whatever they thought was right without the governance of any king, human or divine. And I've told you that in the Jewish Bible, the book of Ruth is placed among the writings, telling the story of Ruth, a Moabite, who married Boaz, a wealthy Jewish landowner, and bears the fruit of the greatest king Israel would know, King David, offering a conversation between this story and a book of edicts. So you know where the book is placed in Jewish readings for the year. You know where it's read in the Christian Bible and in the Hebrew Bible. All of these juxtapositions are important. So I'm curious, how does this story read against your life today, in companionship with your life? Let's look at the gift of these first 22 verses to see what this book might have to say to us today. A man of Bethlehem in Judea leaves there with his wife and 2 sons because they're in the city that is literally named House of Bread. There is no bread. There is a famine. This courageous man and his family go to live in a foreign land where there is bread. But while they are there, the man dies. His sons, Mahlon and Chilion, which means sickness, and Chilion, which means wasting, not very auspicious names, I think, take wives among the local population. 10 years later, Mahlon and Chilion die, each of them leaving behind a widow. The man's wife is named Naomi, and the wives of the sons are Orpah and Ruth. Word came to Naomi from Bethlehem that the famine was over, and once again there was bread in the house of bread. So she prepared to turn home, taking her 2 daughters-in-law with her. But she wasn't long on the journey when she decides that it really would be better for the girls to go back home to their own mothers. At first, both of them protest, and ultimately Orpah does return home, but Ruth is committed to going with her mother-in-law, speaking words that many a couple have requested at their wedding services, perhaps not knowing that those words were first spoken not between 2 partners in a marriage, but between a daughter-in-law and a mother-in-law. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. Ruth's words do indeed echo a marriage covenant, a wedding vow, if you will. For partners will travel the good times and the bad times together, will they not? The plenty and the want, the joy and the sorrow, the sickness and health. They will build a home together and they will tend it. They will claim one another's families as their own, and I just have to pause on this comma in my text to tell you that my husband, claiming my mother as his own, led her to church today. She drove herself, but he was not content to trust that she would get here, so he made sure she could follow and be there. So a beautiful example of being claimed as one's own. So they will claim one another's families as their own, and hopefully you hear in this juxtaposition of this text someone who has claimed you and yours as their own. And hopefully they will build up one another in faith as they share times of corporate worship and personal devotion. Who would know that drive back from a vacation weekend would end up in weekly faithfulness at church together? But here you are. In Ruth's words, we even hear echoes of God's promises to us. Maybe from Psalm 139. Where can I go from your spirit, the psalmist asks. If I go to the farthest ends of the sea, even there you are. And perhaps you hear echoes of the promises we made just last week right over here to the newest members of our congregation, as they promised to be faithful disciples and members of this congregation. And we in turn made promises to them to include them and to support them. In just 22 short verses, we've seen Ruth and Naomi have already been through so much together. They came to know one another as neighbors. They shared joy in marriage and tables of plenty. They suffered together the sorrow of loss. In the 61 verses left in the book, we will see how Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi will be a blessing not only to Naomi, but to a whole community of and for generations to come. This is the hope we have as we lift up prayers over life partners when they wed. We often employ these words from our Book of Common Worship. Those who marry are called to a way of life marked by grace, fidelity, and mutual respect, as they bear one another's burdens and share one another's joys. As this couple makes their promises today, the pastor will say to the congregation, families are joined, friendships are strengthened, and a new community of love is formed. I think that might be good words for when we stand at this font and welcome new members. A new community of love is formed. We include these words in our prayer for couples at their wedding, if we're using the Book of Common Worship. Give these two such fulfillment in their mutual love that they may reach out in concern for others. Through your steadfast love and wisdom, may the family they become reflect your care for all creation. Again, a prayer we could say over times when new members join our fellowship. Biblical scholar Kathleen Robertson Farmer says that the book of Ruth is a parable. It's not unlike the parable of the Good Samaritan, I think, in which a foreigner demonstrates righteousness that perhaps the people of God have forgotten. In the verses we read this morning, we saw Naomi's life transformed. As she said, from full, she came into Moab with a husband and 2 sons. And then all is lost. In the verses yet to read, Naomi will be full again because of the one who travels with her, the one who reflects God's faithfulness to her. Naomi's address upon her return is a lament. She believes she has nothing. Have you ever felt that way? I have nothing. But she does not come home empty-handed, does she? For she holds the hand of a faithful one. And even as the chapter ends in lament, so too there is hope. For Naomi and Ruth have returned to Bethlehem, the house of bread, and it is time for the harvest. This is the gift of our faith. even when we believe our hands are empty, there is God who has promised never to leave or forsake us. This is the gift of the church. We make promises to one another, to strangers even, folks who may seem foreign to us, and they make promises to us to be there with us in our joys and our sorrows, to share this dwelling with us and to take care of it, to share this journey with us and this God. And by their presence and their dedication, we are all reinvigorated, are we not? Yes. And this covenant love that is between God and us, between marriage partners, between church members who become like family, can be a parable for the whole world, I think. A story of faithful covenant love that pours out and blesses beyond the bounds of our personal prayers, our homes, our churches, our time even. So, church, here is my invitation to you. Part 2. Part 1 is go home and read all 85 verses of the book of Ruth. Part 2, let us collaborate with God to write a story of covenant love, of powerful, faithful companionship on the journey of life, so that others might see and be blessed. Amen.